excited to have this session and conversation today. And I know that the audiences are very much looking forward to hearing your thoughts and point of views on the future of our industry. I mean, we are in charge of media, but it's not limited to the area of media, right? Creative and advertising and marketing overall. So I want to make sure that we leave some time to answer the questions from the audience. And those of you who are watching, please make sure that you put the questions directly into the Q&A widget, and we'll answer as many of them as possible at the end. So Michael, great to talk to you today. And before we start, it would be great if you can talk a little bit about yourself, your role at Google, your path to Google even, so people can get to know you.
Yep, thanks for having me. Hope you all can hear me all right. Sorry, I don't have a fancy background, but it turns out the Zoom backgrounds are not compatible with Chrome OS, which is what Google people use. So you have to look at my wall. Apologies for that. Yeah, so I like Kyoko said, I think I run the digital media capability within Google Marketing. We have a central media buying practice called the Media Lab. It's a global team that sits across APAC, North America, EMEA, and across a variety of offices. I'm responsible for the digital part of the team, which includes performance media, so direct response, includes brand centric media, includes B2B, includes ad tech and ad operations, essentially. And also we have a creative services capability within our media team as well that rolls up to me. So my job is global and have people kind of in all three regions. I've been at Google for 9 years, and basically I'm one of the co-founders of the media practice along with my boss. We started within a week of each other, and we've been plugging away ever since.
I didn't know that part. Just a week.
Yeah, within a week, randomly. And came from Bank of America, worked agency side prior to that. So media, almost my entire career, agency and brand side. Thanks for having me.
Well, that's great. So Essence recently published a survey of expert opinion about what advertising might look like in 2030, Michael. And it really underlined that many of the trends that we have been conscious of for some time have already been accelerated by the pandemic. So when you think about what our industry might look like a decade from now, what do you think will change the most from today, and what will change the least? What's your point of view on that?
I think, we less ad-supported time with consumers, especially longer form advertising. So if you think about, a 30-second spot that you kind of blast out there via historically television, I think those days are starting to really wane, and COVID consumption trends, made that trajectory clear and accelerate across really all demographics, including older demographics, which used to be kind of the stalwart for TV. So I think marketers getting comfortable with, where are those people going? What does advertising that exists within those places actually even look like? In many cases in the video space, clearly people are going to non-ad supported platforms, but even the ad supported platforms on connected TVs, for instance, have less commercial time per hour. And then clearly there's a lot of consumption that's shifted over to social platforms and the likes of YouTube, et cetera. That's nothing new, but it's just continued to broaden demographically as well. And so I think figuring out what that means, not only from a media perspective, so that you're basically not tethered to the past, but also from a creative perspective, because I think our creative playbook and the way that we build brands and tell stories has got to evolve with consumer consumption. I think historically, advertisers have been a step behind consumers, and I think we see it super clearly now. COVID sped things up in that regard, and so I think there's going to have to be a reckoning and kind of a shift in the way that we approach that. The other big one that I think is going to become much more central to our ways of working, kind of whether we like it or not, is how much we need to lean on automation and kind of machines to help us scale. We're going to all have to, those in the digital space, become more comfortable with less granular data. Clearly, the cookie and device ID oriented changes that are happening, and so I think relying on machines to help us, be relevant to the right people in ways that we can't see things granularly. I think that's going to be something that is going to be key and much more central. I mean, Google stack has been there for a while and is starting to go there creatively even more now as well. And we've been a part of that that shift too.
Yeah, you touched a little bit on media, but also media and creative need to work closely together, right? And when I'm speaking a lot to the senior marketing people existing in our clients, but also new clients, definitely there's an urgent, not just that it's a priority, but it's actually extremely important now to think about how to bring media and creative closer together. So in talking about the future, I mean, there are media agencies, creative agencies, and the experience agencies, and they're different partners, right? That you as client and marketers work with. What do you think is critical as a person who's actually on the brand side, but you also, have the responsibility to, of course, bring all these pieces together? How do the teams work together today, and what are the things that we can do more of together, in the future?
Yeah, well, again, I think the playbook has to be rewritten clearly. The notion that you could create a 30-second ad, or I mean, we like 60-second ads even in some cases. And that you can essentially run those on one main platform, i.e. TV screens, and reach pretty much everybody you need to. That's not the case clearly anymore, and it hasn't been for especially the younger end of the spectrum for a while. So I think first, understanding kind of platform requirements and nuances creatively. How are you relevant given individual platform nuances? That's something that creative people have to lean into and invest in, and media people whose job it is to really understand that, I think also have to help bring their creative colleagues along and make that a partnership. Like, how am I really relevant on this platform? I think the other thing that's key is understanding consumers, being strongly rooted in insights. My general perception of online advertising is that it's been either generic, generally speaking, kind of wallpaper, lowest common denominator, or it's been kind of dynamic remarketing ultimately. And I think there's something in the middle, which is, I understand consumer behavior and triggers, and I'll align my media and my creative to those signals or those triggers, and I make my product relevant. I help people understand the benefit of my product at the right moment by doing that. But you can't do that if it's just media. That's true. And I think oftentimes, if you think about how we operated as advertisers in the past, we were very focused. Media people have been very focused on data and targeting, and often then you just deliver a generic ad. And so you're just precisely targeting generic advertising, and I just don't think that's the way to achieve breakthrough at all. Yeah, I think it's something that I hope we can discuss more about in marketing community as well, because I think this is a topic of interest, but something that everybody's trying to also do today. Obviously, we've gone through a very challenging past 12 months, and we're still going through it as well right now. But what are some of the lessons, Michael, that you have learned during the pandemic that will shape the way you approach marketing, maybe potentially differently too, right? What would that be? Some of the lessons you've learned? Yeah. So one is when COVID and lockdown started to happen, we started to just get closer to consumer behavior and more regularly look at how things were changing. So we provided an exec view weekly, rooted in search trends behavior, probably not surprisingly for us. But also we looked at media consumption behavior and how consumption was shifting, because it was changing pretty rapidly, and it actually started one way and ended another if you look at kind of how when the lockdown kind of for various countries continued. So one of the things we looked at is just kind of organic demand for specific products or categories that we operated in. So we saw very clearly some products that we just didn't market that much. There was increased demand clearly. So things that facilitated people working at home, or obviously at home education, things like Google Wi-Fi, for instance. Meet, we're on Zoom right now, but I mean, video conferencing in general clearly has blown up, and obviously we could see that because we have Google Meet, as a product. Chromebooks, the increased demand for laptops. People were, educating their kids at home and needed more computers. And so what we wanted to do is make sure we understood what consumers needed and wanted, and that we were basically aligned to that demand. We also were sensitive to messaging, within that demand. So for instance, we have messages out there about like virus protection in Chromebooks, and those things we decided were not sensitive given what was going on. And so we did a big giant scrub to understand kind of what might be perceived poorly overall. We also, like I said a second ago, we're looking at media trends, so we could see things like, TV viewership was actually up when the, lockdowns first started. And then over time it waned and really has dropped off. But it was really interesting for us because, my job is global, and I could kind of see as countries were locking down media consumption and behavior. Italy locked down really early, and we could see things that were happening in Italy, for instance, very early on, and kind of could see that cascading around the world. So just getting closer to those insights and figuring out what we were going to do about it. We definitely shifted our presence, our messaging, our budgets accordingly, for sure. And it was an active, very high level conversation. That's one, and that's kind of the work thing. The second thing is the people part. As a team, we've been around for a while. Like I said, we've been around for about 9 years. We have a lot of people who've been around. I think we have a strong foundation as a team. People know what they need to do their job. And so as a manager, everything went to video, clearly. And there were no more hallway encounters. There were no more random lunches or dinners. There were no more, let's go, go to New York and go to London, visit our team there. And so I focused just more on kind of amping up the EQ side of, my management skills to make sure that people were okay, because people have different challenges. You had single people who were kind of locked down by themselves for extended periods of time. You had, working parents who were trying to figure out how to juggle getting their kids educated or losing childcare. You had people who had real problems with work-life balance and kind of drawing the line between, maintaining well-being. And so I did more informal check-ins, kind of stand-ups, more one-on-ones, and spend at least half the one-on-ones really just making sure people are okay, kind of personally. And so I think having a strong foundation as a team allowed us and allowed me to do that. And I was just overt about making sure that I did that, whereas in the past it just kind of happened more organically.
Yeah, that's true. And the kind of conversation that when we were in office, you didn't have it as much, when you were like on Hangout or different kind of chats, kind of conversation, to kind of using technology. But now I think it's just important to check in first, before we talk about any project, and just,
Totally.
we spend half of the time really checking on each other, right? And looking after each other.
Yeah, and if you it's very easy to get into transaction mode. We have meetings on, and you go from meeting to meeting to meeting. You don't have to get up out of your chair. You don't have to change rooms. You never see anyone in the hall. You don't sit down with anyone else to eat lunch. It's super easy to get into transaction mode if you let yourself. And I purpose, and we talk about this a lot at Google, focus on well-being and stuff like that. But I also was like, I need to make sure, and I could see some people, we're struggling, having health issues, family with health issues, et cetera. And it's a tough time for a lot of people.
Yeah, and you're definitely in charge of the global, kind of digital marketing organization too. And every market, every region, it's so different, as you said, and it was in phases. And so you got to understand what they're really going through in their cultural context too, was so important. So I had a lot of the similar learnings as well as I managed the agency, and it's different. You can't talk about one thing in the same way, to people in different parts of the world.
Yep.
Now, so Google, just a little bit changing to kind of some of the things around, how you manage data. You're really good at managing real-time data, like what's spiking in search, right? To, make your advertising more relevant. Could you talk a little bit about role of relevance in creativity and how you see that evolving in the future, Michael? That would be great to hear from you.
Yeah. Well, I mentioned earlier some of the Google ad stack shifts, and clearly, no surprise, we don't just advertise on Google, but clearly we do advertise on Google a lot and use most of our stack, hopefully to its fullest. And one of the things that became prominent, Google's been focused on kind of automation in media, bid management, for instance, for a really long time. One of the things that's become more prominent over the last year and a half is that in creative. So automation and kind of machine-driven creative development according to whatever the Google stack and various algorithms know about people that I could not possibly know nor possibly react to with humans. And so there are things called, there are these responsive display ads, there are these responsive search ads, which essentially render ads on the fly based on signals that Google understands, and again in ways that I never could. And so we rolled these responsive ad formats out in partnership with Essence very, very quickly at scale. We have 10 or so products and large scale DR programs that make up 80% of our spend and a lot of revenue. and we saw universally positive results. So we still have the human generated ads there, but the human generated ads basically always lose when you look at the results side by side.
Yeah.
We also gave a fair amount of feedback to the product team about the way those ads looked to ensure that there was a certain aesthetic bar that was being maintained. And clearly we had the core components of the ads approved by legal and went through all the proper requirements there. But I think the notion that we leaned on machines again to ensure that the value prop and the way the products are being positioned was as relevant as possible based on signals we couldn't see or react to possibly fast enough was key on the DR side. On the brand side, a couple things. One, I mentioned the insights thing. We actually, off the back of that kind of COVID set of fire drills, basically early on, created a cross-functional insights focused work stream within the media team to essentially make briefs smarter, we hope.
Yeah.
And so we get a brief from marketing teams like most standard kind of central media teams do. And one of the things we wanted to do is work with those marketing teams to understand what key questions may still be outstanding, or we would ask ourselves, what more might we want to know to make this plan campaign as good as possible? And then we go off and kind of look at various sources of data from kind of high level cultural stuff rooted in how people consume content on YouTube, or search trends data, or social listening oriented stuff. What's going on in culture, down to product usage data, first party data. And then we create an insights packet, which we essentially provide back to the marketing teams and also ultimately the agencies to help guide strategy and guide the direction, hopefully from a marketing strategy perspective, but if not, at least advertising. And if not that, then at least media. And so this is somewhat new-ish for us, but I think really doubling down on insights, because you can't be relevant if you don't understand.
Yeah.
And so I think really rooting ourselves in understanding has been something, this is new-ish for us, but it's something I'm bullish on, because I think every marketer should have some sort of way to systematize access to insights. We also have also used technology to make our ads relevant on the brand side. So we did some stuff again with Essence across several products. In several countries, where we basically use some Google Cloud technology to read content and then to render ads, brand ads, based on that content. So for instance, if someone was reading a video game review about a specific title, like NBA 2K, we could understand what they were reading about and put a Stadia ad on that same page that allowed people to click right in and play NBA 2K as a Stadia demo. It's one of the product value props, is a click to play thing. So we were able to do that at scale across all the different titles that they had. We did it for Nest, tied to specific locations that you could ask your Nest to help you, how long would it take me to get to X, Y, or Z? So we did that across a variety of products, and that was all rooted in using technology to be relevant and focused on, frankly, cookie proof, focused more on content adjacent relevance.
Yeah, I mean, definitely Google is tech. You have your product and technology, and related to that topic of technology, it's taken almost as a given. I will say almost, because I think everyone has a point of view on it, that in the future, all companies, regardless of which industry the business is in, will need to become tech companies in one way or another. And this morning's conversation, I think, from Kay, from Kroger, and Lauren from IBM, I found it really interesting, because they were talking about how they struggled internally, but got there to integrate, some of the technologies to do what they need to do and what they want to do. Do you agree with that sentiment that all companies will need to be tech companies in one way or another? And more broadly, how should marketers, what would your advice be leveraging technology going forward in the future? And how should marketers be thinking about the way they set up operationally, given that there's technology out there? And we might not have to have people in one office anymore. We can actually do things very differently, right? And still deliver the same outcome. So what's your view on that, Michael?
Well, I mean, I think, the prior two speakers from Domino's and Kroger show clearly that, technology is traditionally kind of brick and mortar centric companies. Technology is hugely important. I can't think of an industry where it would not be. I didn't know that it was necessarily, or hadn't heard that it was necessarily a given, but I think, COVID times have kind of shown us that it is extremely important. I mean, some of the things that frankly, our parents or grandparents do now that they never would have done before, curbside pickup or grocery delivery, or, the way that they, interact with kind of e-commerce and traditional brick and mortar companies, that way. I think that just shows very clearly that there is an opportunity. And I think some people definitely relish going back into a store and browsing around, but people are going to preserve a lot of those habits and some of the things that they tried that they would have otherwise not tried, right? And so it's incumbent, I think, on brands to react to that and to continue to carry the momentum forward, because I think that's going to happen whether we like it or not. Yeah, I think from an advertising perspective, like I said earlier, I think we have a tendency to be a step behind consumers and consumption. And I think first thing that's required is to be committed to not do that, to understand where people are going, and to understand how you should get there, right? Like, what do I need? If I can see clearly where trends are headed, what do I need to do to get there? It's clear we still have a ways to go in advertising. Some of the conversations, we're right in the middle of kind of TV upfront conversations, and to what extent we buy TV, for instance, and you look at what's happening with ratings and consumption, and then you look subsequently at what's happening to demand, and it's not really down, right? So consumers aren't there, and advertisers clearly are, right? So or they're not there the way they used to be. So I think being committed to kind of progress and move with consumers, and then from an org perspective, figuring out a way to not get in your own way. I think having a bunch of silos is the antithesis of agility, and when people are changing rapidly how they kind of buy things, research things, etc., you got to figure out a way to build agility into your organization and break down some of those silos that big companies especially tend to have.
Yeah, I mean, you have a big digital marketing team, right, globally, Michael, and you built it didn't happen overnight, and you have a really robust best practices and processes put in place using technology as well. But I mean, what were some of the challenges, as you built that over the last 9 years? I think I know you for 7 years of that 9 years, but I know that at the time I started to work with you, there was nothing in place yet, for example, in APAC. And I think remember both internally working with you, but also with like publishers and vendors like in Asia Pac, in Japan and Korea, we really had to go and communicate to them about what best digital media practice is like, right? So what are some of the highlights for you to build what you have built today?
Yeah, well, permission and license to do so from senior levels is important. I mean, just like most big marketing organizations, we have our own, silos. We've got 3,000-ish people, and so I think we had to earn respect in order to have that license, and so we worked on that over time. We also worked on relationships so that people knew that we had everyone's best, outcomes, ideally on behalf of individual marketers, at our heart. And then we were bringing expertise to the table that was only going to help them achieve end goals. It wasn't about competition or credit. It was about like, let's work together to be as good as we possibly can to deliver the best results we possibly can. And I think when people get to know you and they know that's what you're about, and then you bring strong experts to the table who make the work better, then and you have license from above, then people usually are okay. They're okay with that. And so that had generally been. It took some time to get there. It doesn't happen overnight. You don't just randomly show up. No one knows who you are, and they hand the keys over. But I think we've kind of built up over time. I think just trying to be helpful. Like if you see that there are gaps, you see that there are opportunities for you to help other people in your organization, and you figure out ways to try to solve problems. People like that and respect that. So I think that's kind of the ethos that we try to put forward as a team. And it's helped us kind of scale the practice even in places where it's harder to do so, like Japan, like you mentioned a second ago.
Yeah, I mentioned Japan because I'm originally from that market, although I grew up in the US. And I still remember you were so passionate to explain it in English, and they couldn't really understand English, but they somehow understood you through your body language. And that was like a moment where I felt like, okay, that's beyond the cultural.
I should have learned Japanese. Sorry.
Yeah, you should actually. It's about time. So one of the biggest trends that I think we've been seeing over the past several years has been that there's an increasing, and I think it's been talked about a little bit today in the other panels, but increasing complexity and fragmentation, right, across marketing channels and audiences. So do you think this fragmentation trend would continue, Michael? And also, how should marketers be thinking about how best to reach people in the future?
Yeah. Well, fragmentation in media and new platforms that have substantial scale is not anything new. Clearly, I think the stakes are just higher now, because it's less a nice to have and more a need to have. I need to figure this out because this is where consumers are, and they're just not other places to the extent that they used to be. So I think clearly that story is obvious. If you look at social platform usage, I think YouTube's got a really strong story in regard to that as well. Clearly, I'm focused on it because of Google. It's a primary channel for us overall. And I think, like I said a couple of times, the creative skills required to commit to where consumers are, they're a little bit different. Yeah. And if you don't figure out how to build a brand or how to be relevant in those spaces where you just have less time with people, your ads are quicker, they have to be quicker hit, they're shorter form, they have to really align with the content and feel a little bit more native. If you look at like how advertising on TikTok occurs, for instance, right? It's quicker hit. It has to kind of align with the content in order for you to not stick out in a bad way. And so I think the imperative on us to figure out how to build brands and be relevant is extremely high. But I don't think the fragmentation is new. I just think the stakes are higher basically.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, we've always had different platforms where we need to also choose, but it's more about how we tell the story, isn't it? And in the older like earlier days, it was easier to think about TV first and then make a cut down versions or shorter versions of it and kind of disseminate it across digital space. But it doesn't work anymore.
Look, the whole like the derivative angle, like here's my TV spot and let me figure out how to cut it down or whatever, it was never ideal. But it's even worse. You're like missing huge chunks of the population. You're looking completely out of touch, and you can't deliver scale, over there anymore the way that you used to be able to. So you have almost no choice. So yeah, it's become very apparent. I mean, again, I think the COVID trends and kind of what that's accelerated has made it much more apparent and urgent to me.
Okay. Well, I have a bit more personal question that I wanted to ask. That is when you're looking for inspiration and insight, right, to form and shape your thoughts about the future, just business in general, what kind of books or publications or podcasts do you find helpful? And can you make some recommendations to the audience?
I focus more on education than I do inspiration, maybe when I consume content. So I'm not a big business book guy. I do like podcasts. I've been listening to Land of Giants, which is interesting because it's about my own company and I lived through chunks of it, but didn't have the same perspective. They talked about the Google Glass stuff, skydiving down to announce the product, and I remember that, but I just didn't kind of appreciate it at the time. So that's been kind of interesting. I think it's a Vox podcast. Pivot I listen to, which is the Kara Swisher, Scott Galloway stuff. Yeah. I try to get out of my bubble. Google's a big bubble, and I want to make sure that I'm relevant broadly. And so I do consume content to kind of help me do that and just to inform myself. I watched the WeWork documentary last night, which was interesting. Again, someone who works at a tech company. I definitely recommend that. And then I actually, kind of oddly for a digital guy, I subscribe to the print newspaper. And so I read a lot of news on apps, New York Times, Washington Post, and then I subscribe to the Chronicle here in the Bay Area, and I read that kind of oddly, fairly religiously. That's kind of a connection to my dad and granddad who read newspapers.
Wow. So you're carrying that tradition of your...
I'm trying to keep print newspaper alive by myself if I can. But anyway, I like it. I like the nostalgic component. I spend all day in digital, and I do like the tactile kind of nostalgic thing. And I do the same for books as well, if I can, hard copies. So that's it. I'm kind of boring in that regard, but that's how.
That's not boring at all. And I noticed also, because I work with Google and with you and your team very closely, you issue always like a letter, right, beginning of the year. setting your
Yeah.
vision and, what the priorities and focus should be. And that's also shared equally with your partners like ourselves, which I think is really great because it gives both transparency, but also a spirit, right, of collaboration and partnership. And I can tell that, you're learning and educating yourself too through different channels. So I was curious because of that, because you definitely have a perspective and point of views just beyond, pure media itself. So I find that really inspiring. And talking about inspiring, I ask this in every kind of a panel session or interview that I do, but do you have a mantra that, Michael, that you share with your team or colleagues? Probably more in a work context, but life in general is fine too, but that you can also share to the audience here today?
Yeah. I don't have a pithy mantra. I think one of the things I always try to instill in my own team is just to let the quality of our work speak for itself. People should know us by the quality of our work. Maybe that's a mantra, but that's one angle, is to just really have a high bar and have kind of pride in our own work and aspire to deliver against that high bar. Mm-hmm. And then the other side of it is just the humanity side, which is have perspective. Don't take yourself too seriously. I mean, there's a lot of serious stuff going on in the world, and at the end of the day, my team is digital media and online advertising, and it's extremely important given the spend and given the business results that we're striving for. But we're not saving humanity here, though we had a pretty good vaccine campaign, I think, recently. But anyway, so I think just trying to instill that sense of perspective in the team, and a little bit of levity, so that we don't take ourselves too seriously. I've found it's just key. It's also part of kind of my personality as well.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you for that. I think we have some questions from the audience, and then people who are watching, please send them my and Michael's way. Let's see. Here we go. First one is, I would love to know for both of you how the pandemic impacted what you prioritize from a professional standpoint, or what it has taught you. So Michael, you want to go first?
Yeah, well, I mentioned earlier, I think the pivot to people more it was a genuine pivot. Not that I didn't care about people or ever ask people how they were before, but I think I was a lot more overt about making kind of mental space for it and time for it, and being less transactional. That was probably the biggest pivot. Other than that, not a ton professionally. I mean, personally, I made a lot of pivots. I think I tried to really relish the time I wasn't commuting. I mean, if anybody lives in the Bay Area here, I'm dealing with 2-hour commutes or ridiculous things like that. And so, like a bunch of people, I guess I got a Peloton, and instead I spend my time riding that in the morning instead of riding a Google bus. So that's been great.
Well,
I go for walks with my wife every morning, because she's also working from home, and I have 4-year-old twins, and I spend time with them. So I'm trying to make the best out of the situation. And I recognize not everybody can do that. And I've been fortunate with good childcare and some stability and health. So so that's actually been the biggest thing for me, is just to try to focus on my own balance, and frankly to model that behavior too for the team, though not everybody has the same luxury that I have, good childcare, like I said.
Yeah, and I'm the same and similar professionally. There's so many things happening, and in the days when you can see them in offices, you can quickly have that chat. But to have quick chats virtually, you gotta chat to schedule it in, and then you gotta get on the video call to chat about it. So it's not as spontaneous, and it takes like 3 steps that you don't need to take necessarily when you're sitting next to each other, right? So that kind of already, if that happens 10 times, across 10 people and 10 conversations, it's a lot of kind of actual physical kind of work to do as well. So I told my team that, like, look, let's just just check in every day so that we communicate, and not wait until there's some issues or that you're feeling something, right? And that you wait till next one-on-one, but let's just quickly check in. And so I think my prioritization has become really checking in with the team as a group, but also individually. And personally, definitely that space of working from in this room in front of this computer, and when you get out, I've got 2 kids and a dog and the family, and it's just like mental switch. It was very difficult to do at the beginning. So I blocked in my calendar a time where I just go out and walk, because it really helped to switch off and be a kinder individual to my family as well. So
Yeah.
that was a learning at the beginning, and I think I got the hang of it after a few months.
I mean, the one thing I think I mentioned this earlier is I've started to do stand-ups.
Yeah.
No documentation. Literally, we just kind of have subgroup check-ins, which tend to be 5, 6 people, and that's a good way for me to get take samples, I guess, from people just to see how everybody's doing, kind of in a productive way. Because, like you said, yeah, you have to schedule a meeting to check in with somebody versus stop by their desk or see if they want to get lunch, and so it's different. So I have to just try to create more of those encounters purposefully and regularly.
Yep. So there's another one. One of the things that I worry about with the potential longer term focus on remote working, which we are doing now, is how we get exposure for younger, more junior employees, and probably even the ones we are recruiting, right, from out of college. Is that something you have thought around? Is Google doing anything to ensure new employees get to experience the culture? And Google's very, distinct culture that you have. Like you have campuses, you have all that, onboarding program as well, right? I'm sure for newcomers, not just the graduates, but newcomers.
Yeah, it's an excellent question. I think it's actually one of the biggest downsides of all the talk about people going fully remote out of the gate. That's easy. I mean, we've both been working for a while, right? And so we know how to continue to do our jobs. And if we have to do it via video conference versus in a conference room, it's not the end of the world. We still know what we need to do, right? But there are a lot of people, and Google has a entry-level marketer program, associate product marketing managers, and they're right out of school. They've not worked in corporate environments, and so I think it's hard to take them under your wing if they're on a video chat. It's hard for them to get a sense for corporate culture, no doubt. We haven't announced like other tech companies have that we're going fully remote. We are not, I don't believe. Mm-hmm. And so I actually think Google kind of recognizes a little bit what the person who asked the question is saying, which is the value of that in-person interaction. So I suspect we'll end up in kind of hub offices where we're getting together on specific days. Yeah. So I think there'll be enough human connection to hopefully help people along who are new or maybe younger. Yeah. That's my hope, but it's something that I would certainly be attuned to, and therefore would definitely want to prioritize kind of in-person encounters partially for that reason.
Yeah, I think this one is really hard to replace. I think in-person communication, introduction, onboarding, I think would, of course, be the best, and hopefully it will come back gradually. I'm also doing at Essence like an immersion program, so that's not just about the people who are going to join Essence, but actually an opportunity, right, in a virtual environment to talk more about the industry and what we do in the space of advertising, and get them interested and learn about what's going on, even when they're still in college or universities, right? So I think we have a role to play as marketers and also people in this industry to reach out and not wait, till they graduate and come into our industry. But I think we can, seize this opportunity to go and communicate, introduce, and get people interested and find out what advertising is all about or marketing is all about. And I see that a lot of the companies are starting to do and take those initiatives, which I think is really exciting, but also needed. And they're looking for it. When you're reading all the things on the social platforms, they're looking to learn. They're looking for, opportunities to learn. So
yeah, for sure.
So yes. Last question, and I think we're out of time. What advertisers do you both most admire? What advertisers do you both most admire? Yeah. Michael?
Well, I've been on this kick lately about some marketers with the right kind of brand having a little bit of fun and a little bit of levity. I feel like there has been so much heaviness in marketing for the better part of the year. There's just so much heavy stuff going on in the world, and so something I've been talking to my team about is like how we have a little bit of fun and do kind of interesting things. I always admire some of the fun stuff that quick serve restaurants do, the Burger Kings or the KFCs of the world. I look at that and I say, oh, it'd be fun to just be able to tinker and experiment in ways that those two brands do. I definitely look to an Apple and how disciplined they are when it comes to what they decide to market. You can tell very clearly, like, oh, they're marketing, Mac now, or oh, they're marketing iPhone now, or oh, they're marketing AirPods now, right? Because they line up behind it in a very disciplined way, and it's kind of part of their command and control culture, I think, reflected in their marketing. But I do like the idea that you put your weight behind kind of fewer messages, and you really you're more powerful about them. So and their creative has a point of view and is distinct, but also has some whimsy built into it, like I said early, despite their brand being a pretty serious brand. So anyway, those are just a couple that I would throw out.
Yeah, I think for me, I mean, it's more about how marketers approach and looking at delivering messages. And there's art and science to marketing, and there should be a brand story and that you will be focusing on and building through creativity and using different type of channels. But I think April was talking about measurement. I think in the last session, I think it's extremely important right now that we look at the effectiveness of what you do, right, in marketing. And so brands and advertisers who prioritize that, to me, is extremely, it's good and it's important and it's critical that we can have that kind of discussions and get that advertising out based on that kind of approach to marketing. So I think I'm out of time because April's already on, right? Oh, you're on mute.
I never get old. It never gets old learning that trick over and over again. Hi guys. I don't know if everybody here is taking as many notes as I am, but just a couple quick ones if you haven't. Machine-driven creative development drives results and always wins. Agility is mission critical, can't exist within silos. And where you have the ability to understand more, lean in, more data, more insights. Where you don't have the ability to understand more, rely on the machines to help you be more relevant with the right customers. That was a fantastic session. Michael, Kyoko, thank you so much for joining us today. And I personally took away a lot from that discussion. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Michael.
Thanks for having us. See ya.
Bye. Thanks, everybody. So we have 4 more amazing sessions ahead of us. So please stay tuned. Just a quick reminder, questions again, and everybody seems to be doing a fantastic job of doing that. Just submit your questions for the speakers via that Q&A button on the bottom of your screen. And we'll get to them as soon as the next